Hey friends, I'm Maxwell Freud, a queer Minneapolis-based game designer and the host of Hatch This Way, a limited audio series where I chat with other queer folks in the tabletop industry to learn all about who they are and how they contribute to the hobby by being their authentic selves. Today I am joined by the one and only Bez. Bez, how are you doing?
I am generally okay. Wow, that's a big question in this day and age. I'm doing okay, and I'm doing my best. I like to think. It's hard to say. Oh my gosh, I'm struggling at the first question. It's like,
That's okay.
Am I doing my best? Am I really doing all that I could be doing? When I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch Kim's Convenience, which is a show that I started watching about these Koreans in Canada. And then it's like, okay, I've watched that. I'm going to do some doodling that I've got to do. I've got to doodle all these envelopes. But am I doing enough? That's like the eternal question. And you're never sure. Do you know what I mean? When is it relaxing? When is it necessary? When is it just being lazy?
Yeah, I feel that very strongly because I'm very behind on editing these episodes for the exact same process. I'm like, oh my God, I was like, I'm going to knock these out. And then life happened. And I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of exhausted. And I'm also suspicious. I'm also entertaining the idea that it might have a little to do with long COVID, maybe because I've been more exhausted than I think normal. But I don't know if it's long COVID or if it's just, being alive right now and just me.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, it's like the world is not okay. And I don't know if you know this cartoon, a comic of a little dog and it's drinking tea and it says, hey, everything is fine. It became a big meme. And then like 10 years later, the artist, oh my gosh, I should know them. I apologize. But 10 years later, the artist did a follow-up where, I don't know if you've seen this, they look at it and I say, everything is, wait a minute, nothing is okay. What are we doing? It's all messed up. And like, then since they did that, which was like several years prior to like the pandemic, and then like in all the years that have passed since, it's like things haven't gotten better. It's not like things are perfect. Like, it's like, why aren't we doing something? We shouldn't have. And in the second comic, they use the fire extinguisher and then they put out everything, but like the house is a bit singed and it's like, okay, I really shouldn't have let it get this bad, but at least the dogs put out the fire. But no, we've got all these fires. I mean, whether it's climate chaos or like all the bigotry going on, or like, I mean, I think like you are in this country where people are saying that like you're reverting to the Polish style of you shouldn't be able to get abortions for any reason. Like, sorry I guess it is kind of a whole political stream, but it's like in a country where they said, not your country, where they said the only reason to have an abortion is either if the mother's going to die or in case of rape. Those are the only examples that you're allowed. And then they wanted to make it more strict. And that is bleeping messed up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about this, because editing these episodes, I always ask that question. And then I'm always like, oh, do I need to not ask that question? But then I'm like, no, I want to acknowledge the things going on. I think that's part of having a conversation.
Yeah, like, I mean, actually asking how you are, like, that's the thing. Like, you are actually there asking it. If it's like, oh, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. Like, this wouldn't be a genuine conversation, is it? And like, you started off saying it's about your authentic self. So you know what? If you ask me how I am, I'm going to give you an idea.
I know. I was worried that
I'm angry and I am frustrated and I am scared and I am sometimes lonely. And I am feeling insecure because my finances aren't great and I'm having to borrow lots of money to pay the rent. But, things are going to be okay. I'm hopeful for the future. I'm hopeful that, one of my games will be signed up by a really super big publisher. And that will be really nice. Like, before the first game is printed with a big enough publisher, like, they give you more money than I've had in a year, which is just amazing. And then, like, money isn't like everything in the world, and it's messed up that we see money as our value. but it's kind of unavoidable that in this world where a lot of people are struggling to earn enough money to get by, myself included, it's kind of like, okay, how much am I allowed to charge per hour for this? How much am I allowed to charge for this? And if people are not paying me my asking price for my games, does that mean that I'm somehow devoid of value? And then you inject yourself into your creations. And it's easy to say you are not your game creations. But then when it becomes your passion and then you're spending like 7 days a week working on it, it's easy to get lost in that. And I am trying to take time off. I am, borrowing money from places, and I'm not going to go, like, I'm privileged in a way that I am able to borrow money from folk, and I'm not going to go homeless or anything. Do you know what I mean? And I am privileged in that I've got this sort of safety net. That is part of why I'm planning to emigrate to Thailand, frankly, because yes, it is a lot cheaper. And also it's warm and I do like the food, but the price has a lot to do with it. I'm not going to lie. And that's the gist of it.
Well, I think,
How are you, Max? I mean,
well, I was going to say, Max. Oh, absolutely. I think similar. Like, I feel all that stuff, but I think despite all that, I think it's amazing that you're here with me, and I'm really happy that you're here with me, being yourself, because that makes
we've not
all
killed
that
ourselves
stuff.
Yet, or died yet.
Yeah, I mean, it makes all that stuff tolerable, is having these conversations and.
Oh, you mean the connection? Sorry,
having each other to go through it,
Okay, I thought you just meant the fact that we haven't died. I thought
both. Why not both? They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, you know what? I did try to celebrate things, and it's like, yesterday I am blimmin' privileged. I got to go for a walk in the park, and today I cycled off to see this free cinema where it's just in the open air and there are bars and stuff around. And I kind of cheekily asked someone, hey, do you mind if I try one of your chips? And they were like, yeah, okay. And I was like, this is a good chip. Thank you very much. You've helped make my night that wee bit better. And so I wanted to, pay them in compliments. But generally it was a twice fried chip. It was very nice. And being part of that environment, socializing, and I do pay to go dancing. I pay like a certain price to go dancing twice a week at Paddington, which is close to me. And it's really important. And, in the whole question of, being your authentic self, sorry, but partner dancing is kind of inherently sexist to some degree. And there is a lot of latent sexism in that class, a lot of microaggressions, but then also macroaggression. I don't know what to call it, but the first time that I came back after COVID, someone looked at me and said, sorry, I'm not I don't know if they said sorry, just said, I'm not dancing with you. And this is a rueda where, if you're not familiar, there's a bunch of people who are following, there's a bunch of people who are leading. The leaders normally kind of move their hands and maybe move their body and then tell the followers how they're doing it. And then the leader's job is kind of to communicate clearly and to know what's coming up. And the follower's job is to be quick, to be reactive, and to listen to the body. And there's an interesting dynamic. And personally, I prefer following because I enjoy spinning around and you get to do a bit more moving as a follower, and it's a bit more about the musicality and a little bit less about the technicality, if you know what I mean. But anyway, the point is that someone saying that to me, obviously it bothered me, and it was like, oh, and then they looked at the next person after me because there were more followers than leaders. And this is probably a cis woman. And they said, oh, would you like to dance? And this woman looks at me and said, did you not want to dance? I replied, yes, I did. But they didn't want to dance with me. And the other woman kind of understood what had gone on, and then just kind of puts up the hand to say, no, I'm not dancing with you either. So for one kind of rotation, the two of us were sitting out, but so was this one cis guy. I'm assuming Doris, this guy, but it was, and then that really bothered me. But like, I came back and I'm doing it, and it's like, I've got three options there, right? Either I can not go to the class and say I'm not going here, but frankly, it is really good value. Like, it's a bit of an upfront cost, but you get like 5 hours of dancing a week, which is really good. And except for that one person, I enjoy like 80%, 70% of it, which is, you know, it's a fun way to move. It's a fun way to exercise. And I enjoy moving my body to music. And then again, recently, the person's there and I'm coming up and I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? And I've kind of planned out this speech, and they say, I'm not dancing with you. And I say, oh, why is that? They say, oh, I'm just not comfortable. And I reply, why not? Is it because I'm not a cis woman? And they say, oh, I don't have to explain myself. I'm just not comfortable. It's my right to not dance with you. And then this time they offered themselves to the next person who went and danced. And like, I'd been super stressed about this, and like, I was just physically shaking because like this whole interaction. And I want to keep going. So my two options are either just submissively accept it and be like, okay, you don't want to dance with me, fine, I'll just pop to the side and agree with that. But the third option, which I think I'm going to do, is I'm going to be a bit, passive aggressive about it and be like, oh, have I done something to make you uncomfortable? And because I know fine well it's probably just a transphobic thing, but it's, I don't expect them to acknowledge that fact, but I want them to have to face that. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to make it easy for them because it makes me incredibly uncomfortable. It fills me with reminder, maybe I shouldn't be here. I mean, that's how I felt like the first time. And then I didn't go back like the next week. I'm not going to lie, there was a bit of other anxieties, and there was like, oh, it was slightly raining. That put me off. But I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to go back to this place where, you know, someone's going to be like that. And there's the whole thing of, yeah, when I was doing the cha-cha-cha and mambo, someone else is like, oh, are you leading? And they looked at me. They didn't look at any of the other cis women. And then when there was a cis woman who was happy to lead and said, oh, you know what, I know this well enough, then there's that expectation that you're going to follow. I mean, I understand that music is about sexuality. I understand that everything is entwined. I understand that sexuality and romance is intertwined with everything, but dance is such an inherent part of us. And I mean, if someone's listening to this, I don't know if you'll keep this in, but people might think this is a dance show. But it's kind of, the thing about board games, right, is that there's not normally you do this if you're a woman, you do this if you're a man. And sure, at the table, people could misgender you, or people could assume that you're going to play badly because of your gender or because of whatever. Or people might treat, but there's not an inherent, oh, if you are presenting this way, or if you look this way, then you must be a follower. And if you look this way, then you must be a leader. And by follower and leader, I mean specifically with regards to dancing, not your psychological makeup. But you get what I mean? That it's just inherently a lot more both sexualized, which maybe it sometimes can be, and that's great. Like, it's great for things to be sexual but fundamentally it's just, let's enjoy the music together. And it's a shame that there is this this extra gendered role, whereas it's not like if I play, I'm trying to think of any, Root, for an example of a game that I actually quite like. It's not like, oh, all the women, if you're a woman, you have the most feminine person at this table has to play as the cat. And then the most masculine person has to play as the birds. And then if you're somewhere in between, like, you decide, like, I mean, there's more than two roles in that game anyway. So the analogy doesn't quite work, but you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, I had maybe not super recently, but I went to a Magic draft and I was playing against a person who I assume was trans, but we're playing Magic the Gathering and it didn't really come up, when you're doing a Magic the Gathering game. It's not really part of the conversation of, hey, tell me about how you identify. And it didn't matter. I'm like, they trounced me. I'm like, that's what I focused on. I was too busy getting absolutely decimated by this person to ask about, how they identify. And that was pre-podcast. I think I'm hoping I'm building up the muscle of like courage of being more upfront about how I identify to make people feel more comfortable.
Say, hey,
and making space for those conversations.
This is my name. This is my pronouns. What's your name? What are your pronouns?
Yeah, I'm hoping this is helping me like build up those muscles a little bit, social muscles, because it's not, like you said, it doesn't come up in board games. It's just
imagine if it was like, oh, women need to play white, green, or blue, and men need to play red or black. Imagine, seriously, imagine.
I mean, it's kind of a beautiful thing, but then I also like with this making space to still have those conversations, I think is like the other part of it. I don't want to completely erase having those conversations,
And that's kind of interesting because in your first episode 0, whatever you call it, you kind of talked about when you get your game designed, you want to have like a little flag or something on it. And it's like, I hadn't thought of being that upfront about things before. And I never drawn like a trans flag or a pride flag or anything in any of my games until when I was coloring in stuff, someone asked me to do it for something I was coloring in for them. It's like, oh yeah, this works, and I'll do it for a whole bunch of these cats because I was just drawing and coloring in cats. So yeah, I'll do it for people that haven't specifically said which color they want to do. Honestly, it's kind of faster to do batch processing, so I'll kind of color in multiple drawings at once. So if I'm using a pen for just one card, I'll probably use it for like 5 or 10 with a similar kind of coloring in style. But yeah, Doggo Dash by my friend has like this bright flag all around the sides of the box. It's like, actually, maybe I should do more of that. And I'm really proud of like the representation that I had in what went on to become Yogi, like in my own self-published version. Like, sure, there were a bunch of weird creatures, like a fish with human hands, and it's wearing a jacket, and there was like a bunch of other, like, even weirder creatures. But there were a bunch of very humanish characters. Like, yeah, they were stylized, but there were people of color. There were people who had big bodies. There were people who had skinny bodies. There were people who, dressed in different ways. And I saw myself represented because I literally drew myself. And I've drawn myself in that game, in the junior version, and in Kitty Cataclysm. And my other games haven't really had humans in them. So it's been like, yeah, it's not really here. But I do lots of self-portraits of myself on the back of the envelopes. And these self-portraits are kind of how I see myself somewhat. And so I don't tend to draw myself as glasses because I don't see that as a big part of my identity, even though at a convention, chances are I will be wearing glasses, but whether I draw it or not, it doesn't feel like a big thing. Whereas I'll pretty much always draw myself wearing a skirt because it might be a dress. It's a bit kind of, it's a bit sketchy. But like I've drawn like thousands of these self-portraits because I draw it on all the envelopes I send out, literally. Wow. And it kind of brings a little bit of confidence. Like, yeah, I deserve to be here. And when I post out things to Kickstarter backers, there's often a little comic, and then it'll be literally a picture of me saying, hello, thank you for backing this. And then it'll all be photocopied, but then I'll handwrite their name. So it's like, hello, insert name here. Like, hello, Maxwell, thanks for backing this game. This is how it came to be, and this is part of the story of this, and now you have it. I hope you enjoy it. And that's fundamentally what all the wee comics are. So it's not like the most riveting story or anything, but hopefully it's something that people are, oh, that's quite nice, and now I feel a little bit more connected. And it's me showing off myself to say, yes, I exist, and this is me, and I'm okay. But you're right. We don't have that. Maybe when our part of our identity isn't put to the forefront, maybe it's important to sometimes say, yeah, it should be here. Not to say, not to, and there is a balance, right? Because you can't just say, oh, in this game about matching monsters, I'm going to say that I'm going to invent stories, and I'm going to say this is a trans woman monster creature, and this is a bisexual creature, and this is a creature that's completely aromantic, but it enjoys eating ice. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like that. Like in a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises, I've never written stories for any of these creatures. Like they're not even, I don't think people would call them humanoid, because like the number of mouths and eyes and like whatever they call, like they're the weirdest things I could imagine. And to bring up sexuality or gender or whatever, it feels slightly disingenuous, but then at the same time, having like a little flag in the corner, like having a rainbow, and then like somewhere in the game like that, I don't know, that got me thinking. And I don't have any big conclusion, but maybe it's something that we should do more of.
Yeah, I think what I've learned, and I might do like a what I've learned episode at some point, maybe to like wrap it up, is finding that representation. I do think we need it, but it needs to be motivated. That's like the balance is the representation motivated in the game? And I also just like having that representation out there, are spaces where we can be ourselves, like at the forefront, and it doesn't feel like we're forcing it on anyone. Like we want to feel included and seen, like fully seen for who we are, but we don't want to feel like we're interjecting ourselves, and we don't want to be made to feel like we're interjecting ourselves. Like, oh, they introduce themselves with their pronouns. Like, do we need to, now we have to make it all about pronouns or something? Like, that's a very ignorant way of addressing that. But a response is someone introducing themselves with pronouns. But it's
I think difficult because Fog of Love, it's very much about those relationships. And so my first game, it went on to become Yogi, but like that first version, In a Bind, like I had this idea of, okay, is there representation enough? And I know this sounds maybe like you don't want it to just be box ticking. You don't want it to just be for the sake of the numbers, but at the same time, if you do just draw things mindlessly and it's like, okay, I'm drawing this card, now I've drawn 54 cards, then you do kind of absorb and internalize the patriarchy and everything that you normally see on media and films and games and everything. And so after my first draft, it was maybe like, okay, these are the ones that are probably women, these are the ones that are probably men, these are the ones that are probably non-binary, and these are the ones where I'm no idea because they are like so alien. Like, I don't know what this fish even is, but let's say that this fish kind of looks more masculine, I guess. Sorry, listeners, about my squeaky voice. But at that point, and then taking stock of different sorts of representation, and then when it came time to do the final artwork, I was like, oh yeah, actually changing a few of those kind of helped the ratio. And it just meant that it was closer to I'm not going to say 50-50 because it wasn't just binary, but it was for shorthand. You know what I mean? It was closer to not focusing on one side of the spectrum than the other. And I think that's really important. And when it came time to do Yogi Guru, one of the characters in that, I mean, Simon Caruso was amazing, but when it was the sketches, I asked, hey, could this one character, instead of an old man, could it be like an old lady? Just because then that would, like, and just based on that one, for me, it felt like it helped redress the balance. I would rather it err on the side of showing off more underrepresented people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of creating a world or a reflection of the world. So if your game has majority white people, that's literally the opposite, because white people are the global minority. So
it's
you're not really reflecting
like
the world.
A fun game, it's like you're saying, this is a fun world. This is what a fun world should look like. And then, yeah, as you say, white people, I think, are globally like 10% of the population. And if you show off only white people in a fun game, you're saying, hey, this is what it takes to make a fun, happy world, which I know that message maybe doesn't seep in consciously, but that is the subconscious message that you're kind of portraying. And I think that if you are doing something historical, then to ignore people of color, to ignore the stories of women because they are everywhere, is kind of problematic. And if you are only showing white men, is that because there were only white men in this historical period? Or is it because that's who wrote the history books and that's all that you know about? And maybe you need to do a bit more research and do a bit more investigation before you do a game based on that. And if you don't feel able to do a game, actually do some research into your historical period, then frankly, you shouldn't be doing a game about that historical period. Just do a game based on an alien planet, or a game based on anthropomorphized animals, or whatever, or demon plants. I don't think we have any games about demon plants, and I'd like a game about, like, that could be cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's also a reflection of how you see the world and the kind of like the people you associate with. If your game is all straight white men, you might be hanging out exclusively with straight white men because you're not thinking about the people that you interact with on a daily basis seeing themselves in your game.
I mean, I'm going to admit, I heard you say that you've got to bits of xenophobia, like bits of latent homophobia. I don't know if it still exists in you, but you mentioned in one of your earlier shows that you had this kind of from your parents. And I think
like homophobia for sure, yeah.
Like, for me, like, definitely there are all sorts of forms of xenophobia and that I kind of have to unlearn, if you know what I mean, and work on. And it is work. And yeah, that is the thing. Like, we do all need to work to unlearn these things and decouple ourselves from what everything has been saying.
Yeah, this is kind of out of order, but that's cool because I like things being unique and different. So jumping back to how I normally, this is probably a good time as any to ask, how do you identify as a human being? What are all the amazing things that, because they don't have no one has a visual. They just have a name, Bez. What is Bez? What are the ingredients?
Well, if people want a visual, I wear a lot of red. I did actually count my red items, and I realized that today I am wearing 75% red, by which I mean I'm wearing a red top. I was at the time wearing a red jacket and red socks and red shoes and a red bottom and also red underwear. But then my glasses are not red, and my hair bobble, I don't know if you can see it, it's not red, it's actually black. And also my headphones are not red. That's more to do with the availability of red headphones. I do have a red hair bobble, but I only wear it for special occasions because I've not got that many. And, you know, glasses are quite expensive. So these have lasted me more than a decade. But when I change them, I will probably get red glasses. Well, red frames.
Okay, so red being one of the key identifiers. If we see you, What if we want to get to know you? What are some
visual? I know what you're going for. And you don't normally mention that, but in terms of what labels, how should people know me? Okay, I am a trans woman. I identify as polyamorous, although I'm not with anyone right now. I'm pansexual, neurodivergent, almost certainly on the autistic spectrum, diagnosed with depression. I'm willing to say that. I guess I'm also a designer, streamer, artist, self-publisher. That's who I am in the tabletop space. And then we get like, what are our identities? Like for me, musicality and performing, specifically performing, is such a big part of my identity. Like performing with music, playing music. And yeah, but it's interesting, like when a hobby becomes a core part of ourselves, because I know that this show is all about, like, well, it seems to be mainly about gender and sexuality, although I know you've touched upon neurodivergencies, but then it's interesting because you're, at some point, even though this isn't really an explicit adult show, but there's a lot of specific, I might be aromantic, but I'm still kind of working that out, by the way. And there's lots of sexual kinks or preferences that might be seen as parts of your makeup, parts of your identity, and certainly any passion. Frankly, anyone who's in the board game industry probably sees board gaming as a core part of their identity. And I don't see going on the internet as a core part of my identity. I don't see, I guess maybe it's a core part of the identity because it feels different, because I don't see talking to people as a core part of my identity. I am extroverted. And I guess if someone got to know me, they would be like, oh yeah, Bez is an extroverted person. They really brighten up when they're with people, and they probably talk too much, which people can already tell at this point. So yes, carry on, ask your questions about, yeah.
Well, I think another thing is you're also a person of color, which is a further identifier in especially this hobby and industry.
Yeah, I'm Scottish Iranian, so I have been subject to bits of racial abuse as a child, and less so as an adult, possibly because I give something more visible for people to discriminate against me with, if you know what I mean. But yeah, as an adult as well, I've been subject to racial abuse, like to the point where I've had, I don't know whether to bring this up. I guess skip forward like 2 minutes, slight trigger warning of physical assault, where, I was enjoying this fire, and there was, I think it was a religious celebration of a religion I'm not part of, but they'd done this in a local park. The embers were dying. I'd gone to their holy place. I'd come out. I'd shared a meal. I was like, oh, yeah, this was lovely. They had all these fire dances, and then come out watching the ember. Someone comes out and says, oh, why did you burn this? I said, it wasn't me, but it was a celebration. There were lots of people. I'm just enjoying the fire, and I'm really enjoying. And they said, you should go back to where you're from. And I'm like, I was born here. They spouts off a couple of other things, and then they reach really close to me, and with 2 fingers, they make a very rude gesture in Britain. I apologize for doing this to you. And they literally stick these 2 fingers up my nostrils. Now, I had been warned by one of my siblings that if someone ever touches me in aggression, push them back, because someone said to me, if anyone's like, oh, who are you? What do you think you are? You pack. I'm sorry for this, Rachel. But, just stand there and take it if they're talking smack about you. But the moment that they point to you poke you in the chest or whatever, just push them back as hard as you can and say, don't bleeping touch me, using the F word rather than bleep. And I did that. And the sad thing, it was like an older person. I didn't feel endangered for my life. But then they got up and they were trying to whack me with their stick. And so I was like trying to think, like, do I try and protect myself, or do I just go, like, in the end, I just went off because that felt like the decent thing to do. Like, I was young, they were old and enfeebled, but I went home, I told my sibling about this, and they said, well, yeah, frankly, the only thing you can take pride in is the fact that eventually people like that will die out, that this is the approach. They will just be unhappy, there will be more immigrants, there will be more immigration, and people will mix more, and they're just going to be unhappier and unhappier, and hopefully as the years go on, this will change. But yeah, I am first generation, which means that, by which I mean I was born in Scotland, I was born in Glasgow, I consider myself a Glaswegian. I grew up there, I spent 18 years of my life there until I went to Paisley. No, I went to Dundee for a few years, then I came back to Glasgow to the parents' house, and then, yeah, like a bit later, then I came to London. But people still hear my accent and say, oh, are you Scottish? Which I appreciate, rather than them saying, when people are like, oh, where's that name from? And happily, it's like fairly easy to say, yeah, my parents were born in Iran. And that, yeah, if you use that information as you would like, I don't appreciate generally that being something that people ask very early on when they get to know me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it does seem like it comes from a place of exoticism and trying to, yeah, label people. And I remember at school, one time I was like, oh, I'm going away on holiday. This is going to be my last time going to Iran for like a few months or whatever. I'm going there for a few months. And then someone in the school said, oh, are you getting an arranged marriage? Is that? And so I was like, wow, why would they think that? I mean, that's not even something that generally happens in Iran. They just had no idea about me. And in that moment, I realized how little they understood me, how much they assumed that I was totally alien to them. And it just reminded me of this gulf that no matter how many times we'd been in class together and, you know, played a game together or whatever, they would always have this idea of, oh, who is this strange person who is clearly of color? And it's weird because I stand here and I'm looking at myself in the camera and I'm relatively light-skinned, but I'm still dark enough that people would shout out things. So it's kind of a weird thing because in Scotland, especially, I don't think I ever saw any black people in real life. Like, there weren't any black people at my school at all, I don't think. So, like, while I was there, not that, because it's just, it's not like London where people come and then they stay here for a while. It's really cosmopolitan. It's certainly not like most of America, but Scotland is just really white. And so even though if I was looking at grayscale, like if I put my face into grayscale, like from a thing, like no one's 100% black, no one's 0% black, no one's actually that black. Do you know what I mean? Like you've always got a bit of likeness, and no one's like actually as white as a sheet of paper. Even if you're anemic, even if you're like there's always a tiny bit of pigments, like even the blood going through your skin. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm probably like one shade above, like, yeah. And even that was enough for people to other me. It's just the way it is. And so I think that, yeah, as like talking about being questioning and coming out, like as a child, I think that I was already alien enough. Like never felt like I was in a position where I could question these things. Frankly, coming down to London, that was the start of when I was like, yeah, actually, I'm going to start questioning all these things.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've been to London and I've been to Ireland, and then I've never been to Scotland. And I know those are very different countries, but I think even Ireland, comparable to me, is in my head is like a very white little island there. And I don't imagine Scotland being too drastically different, and feels extremely white just from, I don't think Scotland didn't think of diversity. I think white people. Yeah. Very, very what's the term for Scottish people? Inappropriate. You know, I feel there's a better identifier. Like Scotland is very crass white people. I think that's like my impression of Scotland, just
like
based on media.
Lots of rude words, you mean?
Absolutely, just strings of crass language.
Oh, I think that's a bit played up, and you know, who's that? Willie, the groundskeeper on The Simpsons? Like they are, you know, played for laughs, and it's a bit like it's a bit of a shame that they are. Sure, there's a lot of redheads in Scotland compared to the rest of the world, so that's fine. But then when Willie's a redhead, I mean, when Willie's an idiot, and they do this horrible explanation of haggis, and it's like, oh, it's as good as it sounds, and everyone's like, oh, and the joke is that haggis is this horrible thing, and that's the punchline. That's it. Sounds horrible, and it, like, if you think about sausages, like they don't sound that nice. Like sausages are traditionally done in the intestine of a pig. And lots of food, if you look at how it's made, is actually, oh, that's how they made this. Like, this is how these chickens were raised. Oh, that's how these animals were slaughtered. And I think we need to get over, like, this disgust of, I mean, it's not a Scottish thing, but like chicken feet. Like, so many times I've gone into dim sum and had these chicken feet, like lovely things. And let's get over ourselves, because actually using all parts of the animal, if you are going to slaughter it to eat, which sure, maybe we should be doing less of, but if you are going to slaughter and eat an animal, we should be using all the parts of it. And yeah, haggis, it's not just about the offal, it is kind of also about the grains as well. And there is a delicacy to it. And I think that I would encourage people who do visit Scotland to have haggis in 3 forms. Once in a restaurant, just like sliced on a plate, you know, just a slice of haggis. Once in a chippy, like haggis and chips, deep fried haggis and batter and chips. And once, if you can, although this is only really if you're staying at an Airbnb, I guess, go to a butcher's and get like a proper haggis, or like a haggis, like maybe it's done commercially and like in a little, it's normally nowadays synthetic bags, but then you'll unwrap it, you'll steam it for a few hours, and one of them should feed quite a few people. And if you're at an Airbnb, do that with some mash, like tatties, like traditionally it's done with swedes and potatoes, but yeah, just let's not be othering people. I guess that's what this whole show comes down to. Even like Scotland, I mean, in a lot of media, let's not make it so that they are the butt of the joke.
There's a really good TED Talk called, I don't know the full title, but it's about the single story narrative, like the dangers of a single story narrative. And that's like, I know I base my knowledge of Scotland on this one representation that I have of Scotland that becomes your single source narrative. The weirdest
thing is that Scottish people play into this narrative. Like so there's this like there's a kind of cap that you can buy with a tartan on it and then ginger hair. And sure, some tourists will buy this, but a lot of Scottish people will just buy this and be like, yeah, I'm proud to be Scottish. I've got this tartan cap and ginger hair. And it's like, you're just playing into the stereotype. And it's really weird because, yeah, sure, lots of English people come up to Scotland and there is this kind of rivalry and it is real and it's kind of still raw and fresh for a lot of people because of what's happened over the past few hundred years. But no other country that I know has basically plays into their own stereotypes as much as the Scots do.
That's interesting. I think Ireland was a little bit like they loved St. Patrick's Day. I was like, I can't believe they're actually into selling all this merchandise because it seems kind of stereotypical. But no, they're like, no, we love it. Like, yeah, we're gonna have a great time. we're gonna We're going to do all the Irish things. I'm like, okay, great. So now that we've talked a little bit about where you're living, talk to me about, and you mentioned it, but the coming out process once you moved to London, what was that like for you?
Oh my gosh. I think the key thing, like you say, when you're talking about representation and it encourages people to question things. When I was in Glasgow, even when I started questioning things, I never felt safe to do that, to explore it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a relatively small city. I mean, it's the biggest city in Glasgow. It's the most populous city in Glasgow. It's probably a fairly populous city compared to lots of American cities. But it's small enough that for board games, there was like one thing that was kind of happening on a Tuesday, one thing that was happening on a Wednesday. And except for my one friend who was happy to play board games, like that was it. And then I was trying to set up another thing just for playing board games. And once a month, which I was struggling with because of the population density, frankly, just getting people excited to come over regularly for this thing. And then I went to London, and London on Board, there was a place to meet up with people every night of the week to play board games. Board gaming is a big part of my life. And frankly, if I were to be excluded from a place and be told, no, you can't come here, you can't play board games now, that would be a real travesty for me. I'm not going to lie. I would be quite heartbroken. At this point, I've gotten to know a few more people, but I still sometimes go to London on Board, and I love having people over. I've got like a ridiculous number of games. But back then, it was a case of, well, I'm playing so many new games every night because I go to a group and then I might play like 4 games that I've never known before and like 2 games that I knew before. And that's like a brilliant night. And then I go home and it was, I think it was always in my head that I didn't necessarily fit. And I'm going to say some stuff because lots of people have fine times with their families or whatever, but when I was younger, I remember if there was any kissing and it wasn't heteronormative, then it would be a case of, oh, that's change the channel. But like if it was someone who looked like a man kissing someone who looked like a woman, then it would just be left on TV. And this was when so that was kind of ingrained in me. And it wasn't until I was performing as part of a cabaret show, because I can play the piano. I'm not grade 8 or anything, but I'm good enough that I could probably play a simple melody after listening to it a few times, and I can improvise and I can play something that has never been played before that you would probably like the sound of. And I did a lot of performances, and at some point someone said, oh, you're doing all these open mic nights. Have you considered asking these people for Spangled Cabaret? Spangled Cabaret, it's a really welcoming space, people of all different representations, but also all sorts of different acts. So when I went there to check it out in October, the month before I was due to go on, it was like someone who was dressed as Dracula running around the bar and then spreading this kind of ticker tape around lots of customers. There was someone doing puppetry where they were miming and doing a duet with the puppet. There was the Creative Martyrs, who are an amazing band who dress up like people from a vaudeville act from like the 1920s or something. And then they sing songs about fascists falling in love or burning books and about the end of the world and how we're all about to die. And it's got a touch of humor, but it's got a touch of darkness, which I really appreciate. And there were all these fun different acts. And yeah, the Glasgow Glam Bangers, which were a punk rock band and fiercely being like, we look like what we look like. And not all of them are cisgender. And so for my first performance there, I was like, okay, it's meant to be a panto thing. Maybe I'll buy a couple of things and dress like a dame. But then some of those clothes just became parts of, okay, I'm going for a performance. This is what I'm going to wear on this stage. And, that black skirt, is not something that I'd wear today, not just because it's black, but also because of the fit. It doesn't quite suit me. I prefer something that's a bit more fluid. But like, I've now had space to, explore this and learn about, what kind of cuts I like, because this was not something that I would have felt safe exploring properly. Whereas when I came here and there were all sorts of clubs in London. I mean, there's all sorts going on. And it's like, you know what? At a certain point, if you don't accept me, there's 6 million other people here in this one city. I'll find someone else who does accept me. And that's kind of what allowed me to come out. And I don't think that there was ever a case of really questioning it, but it was kind of at this point, I'm not necessarily going to undergo surgery or HRT, but please call me she. And I lost I'm not going to say I lost a friend because they weren't really a friend, but someone said, oh, what do you mean? And then, because I didn't reply like that day, because it's a difficult question. And then they unfriended me and I was like, oh, that's a bit sad. And like, the truth is that increasingly, I started dressing like myself around family. And increasingly, I would dress maybe with less feminine skirts, if you know what I mean. And so not like kinds of floral patterns or bright, kinds of pastel colors, but okay. And for those who are curious, the whole red thing is just because I wanted to be noticed when I was handing out my first game, when it was done for the Kickstarter backer. So I ended up buying, I already had some red clothes. I put on the red clothes that I had and was like, find me, I'll be wearing red. Then people got to know that I'm a person who wears red from this one convention. So I was like, oh, maybe I should tap into this. And then it became not only a thing that I do for conventions, but also a thing I do day to day. Although I do have some red T-shirts that also have prints on them, which I would not wear for a convention. I would not wear any brands or anything at a convention. But anyway, the point is that at a certain point, it did become I'm not going to walk with you if you're wearing this skirt. If you wear trousers, I will walk with you. That's what one of my parents said. And it was like, why is that an issue? And he said, people might think you're weird. Or people might think that you're a woman. And it's like, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong if people think that I am a woman? And then it's like, it's just weird because you're not. And it annoys me, frankly. There's lots of trans fetishists out there. And there's this language of, are you dressed? Which is kind of meant to be shorthand for, are you dressed as a woman? And if someone asks me that, I will try to gently educate them. And when they say, are you always dressed? I'll say, no, I take off all my clothes when I get showered. And then, but it's like, I dress as myself. And in truth, there have been 2 occasions this year when I dressed up as a boy and I wore a suit because it was a funeral and it was lots of family who don't know me as me, if you know what I mean. And it is a weird thing because for sure there's a bit of cultural thing. And then one of my siblings, when I told them that I identify as a woman, their first thought wasn't, okay, how can I make things safe for you? But the first thought was, well, if you dress up like this all the time, then this is going to make things really uncomfortable for our parents because a lot of Iranian people won't be able to understand it. And that's kind of the, sorry to use these words, like inherent bigotry that I'm kind of fighting against, I guess, is a fair way to put it. So 2 out of my 3 siblings know, and one of them still uses male pronouns for me and calls me bro, which I haven't felt able to kind of tell them, please stop doing this. And I'm not going to lie, there is like a power disparity because, they're doing a lot better and like their life's kind of more sorted out. And when we're chatting, it's like there's never a great time to remind them and say, hey, please, because you actually asked about this. And with some of the interviews that I've done, like the first time that I was in Tabletop Gaming Magazine, which I was really excited to have this interview, and then I put this, and then it's like, oh, who is she? And it was like, oh, that applies to me. And then, yeah, for one of my parents, it's like, oh, this is Bez's persona for board games, and Bez is they called me by my birth name, and then, but, oh, my child is being corrupted by feeling like they have to put on this persona for board games, and now they are trying to take it into their real life, and which it is kind of true about the Red, because the Red started there, and they're like, actually, oh, I hate seeing you in red. Can you wear something else? And like, I do wear jeggings a lot of the time when I see them, is the truth, because it's just easier than having to fight. And yeah, that's a very long-winded way to talk about like one of the things, but yeah.
No, for sure. So, I mean, do you know specifically, kind of what is it that is keeping you? Is it like just a value thing that you're not willing to just cut them out of your life? You're still trying to navigate, existing with them, where even if it means compromising your comfortability as you are to, you don't want them, you're still keeping them in your life, even though it's difficult.
Oh, yeah, it is a messed up thing, because in one sense, it should be a case of, well, if people truly love you, they should love you as whoever. And like, I was in a relationship with someone, we had an open relationship. We had certain rules, like they were very specific, because you can't, it's not just like, okay, yeah, do whatever. It was kind of like, yeah, if we go out together, we will come back home together. And if we are each other's primary partners, so if we aren't able to make time with each other, then don't be going on dates with other people. That should be like a secondary thing. And like, there were a few points anyway. So we went to this club, and I snogged someone who was trans, and this person, the person who I was with, said, okay, I'm not okay with this, and I would be okay with you kissing someone who's a man, even, but I'm not okay with you kissing. And then they use this word in betweener, which is really problematic. And yeah, that's a big part of the reason why we split up. This probably tells you about my autism. We split up by prior mutual consent. So we said, okay, we're going to, yeah, it's not really working out, is it? No. Should we split? Yeah, let's split up. How about 15th of January? How about that's our last date together? And so we'll have kind of one last date, and then we'll officially split up the next day. And so, yeah, just to kind of wrap up things and have some sort of a conclusion. So, yeah, I'm not going to say we're on best terms, but it's a weird thing, because again, you could say, you know what, you shouldn't have to stand for this, and you should just be cutting that person out entirely. And so maybe I don't have strong enough boundaries. It is a very real possibility. It's a real possibility to say, okay, if certain people aren't willing to accept certain things, then they shouldn't be part of your life. Anyway, one of my parents, asked me why we were splitting up, and I mentioned this, and they said, okay, I can handle this. So, but don't tell your other parents. And that phrase, like, I can handle this, it's like, okay, I can, this is not great. And like so many times it's been like, oh, I'm glad that none of my children are gay because it's very difficult for gay people. I'm glad, like, there's a lot of, frankly, looking the other way, if you know what I mean. I think that if people want to be willfully ignorant, they probably will be, because by birth, I am an incredibly hairy person. I'm like, yeah, probably was like in the top 1 percentile for when I was at school. And I've undergone a lot of treatments, and yeah, some of it is quite expensive. And I think, is this worth it? But it is good for my mental health. And like parts of me is like, yeah, am I going to be in a situation where I do start HRT, or I even have like top surgery, and it's still just something that we just never talk about? And yeah, it is like just the whole sorry, like now I'm thinking about Encanto. If that's the name of the film, like, we don't talk about Bruno. It's like this kind of like, not that I'm not welcome at the house. They say I don't phone enough, and like they love me going up there, but it's like, yeah, we don't talk about this one person, like this one thing, like your true self. It's kind of like we're ignoring that. It's like down in the basement to be forgotten about. And yeah, I don't think that there will ever be this easy resolution with my parents. I don't think that will ever be resolved, but I've got too much love to cut them out of my life.
Yeah, it's not like they're, it's not them cutting you. I think that happens sometimes with people where like the family like disowns them, or makes it a hostile environment where it doesn't sound like they're making it a hostile environment for you necessarily, or like it is. I don't know.
I mean, it kind of
is, because
difficult. It's like, if you come here, you have to wear this, and look, like twice this year, like for the funeral and for the other like similar occasion, it was like, okay, I want to be part of this funeral. I didn't know the deceased as much as I would have liked, but then you never know anyone as well as you would have liked, assuming they're a good person. I mean, I know some despots and dictators as well as I would like. Frankly, I have no desire to get to know them any better. I mean, yeah. But I mean, well, certainly not on a personal sitting down with them level. Like, sure, if someone was like, oh, but
it's still like important to you to have that connection, is what you're saying. Like, you're not willing to completely just cut it out.
Yeah, and parts of me does hope that, like I told my friends, and what they suggested is maybe buying a suit that's a bit more agender, like, because I think I've got in this place like one pair of trousers, like probably a couple of the t-shirts were like boys' clothes. It's like pretty agender. Like, I don't feel like anything is super masculine presenting. And then this one suit that's in my parents' house, and it's like, okay, that's a thing that I have. Yeah, maybe I could buy a sharp suit that was like a woman's suit, because yeah, when they say, oh, please wear trousers, it's these kind of things that are basically jeggings. And that's what I wear because that's what I feel marginally more comfortable with. And yeah, maybe I'll be able to kind of push them and accept me through stealth. That's, I guess, either I will just change very slowly and they will eventually accept me, or at some point they will disown, or at some point it's like, well, you know what? I'm actually making the step for surgery and I should probably like make a strong point at this point. Yeah, please don't call me your son. Like, that's really problematic. If you can't get over that, just call me your child or something gender neutral. And yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm not pushing you to like go any direction or do anything. I think, just to understand what it feels like and like what those choices you have to make.
Kind of hopeless. It feels kind of agonizing. It feels stifling, I guess is a good word. Oh. It feels like, frankly, I know that I can't be my authentic self truly when I'm up there. And it's kind of like we've got other kinds of disagreements anyway. Like one of my parents is extremely controlling regarding food. And I've talked to another sibling where they say, oh yeah, I've realized that a lot of my own problems came from when during childhood, and we kind of talk about that and we share our kind of traumas about.
I feel like that's a universal sibling thing. I think personally, from your parents is like, oh, this is where our trauma came from.
Yeah, but there's a lot to unpack, and that's the thing. Like, I don't feel like I've finished one exploration or anything, because this is a lot more than I normally share, and I don't think it's something that can be used as ammunition against me or whatever, because if someone wants to be transphobic, they can be. So like me talking about the treatments that I've got is not going to give them more ammunition. No. But I went for laser hair removal for a couple of years for my back and for my arms, because the more parts of your body you do at once, the more expensive it is. And it's okay, my back is really hairy and sometimes I want to wear something that's backless, and arms are one of the most visible parts of you, arms and hands, and so like that. And then that didn't have brilliant results, but getting regularly waxed actually massively changed. My leg hairs are now so much finer than they were 10 years ago. And similarly with my chest and everything. And with my face recently, I've started doing a lot of facial plucking. So sometimes I will listen to podcasts for a couple of hours and spend a couple of hours doing small parts of the face. And there's basically literally about the size of the palm of my hand now. It's finally kind of free of hair, which I'm really excited by, but it'll probably take another year. So I'm do I pay the money for laser? Would that accelerate it? But also when you undergo laser, then you need to protect it from sun from a certain period of time. So then I could only do it in the winter when there's no more sun here. And even after 6 sessions, based on my arms, I would still have plenty of things. But I don't know why I've not undergone HRT. Part of me is, there is still a bit of privilege that if I were to go to Singapore or another country that's a bit less tolerant of trans people, I can dress as a boy. And when I went to Singapore, I was told by my sibling, oh, if you're coming here, I would encourage you to pack shorts rather than a skirt, because they are actually really conservative, the country here, and you might run into some problems. And there's a question of, okay, do I want to go to this country? But that's just taking HRT, it doesn't mean that I magically passed. You know what I mean? It's not like a magic build. And the thing that really opened my eyes up was, someone that I don't want to say how I know them or anything, because I don't want to bring them into it or give anyone ammunition to go after them, because I've already put myself into public spotlight, frankly, by making games and publishing them and streaming, but this person hasn't. So anyway, let's call them Green, because that's not even a name. So Green, and I just saw a green pen, so that's inspired me. But so multiple times when walking around with Green, they were misgendered. This is someone who, to my eyes, looked like, I would never hope to look more like a cis woman than they do, if you know what I mean, because they've actually had surgery, they've done so much reconstruction, facial stuff, and they've undergone so many, and then they go out and they've always got this amazing makeup, and then someone says, "Thank you, sir." And Green then says, "I'm not a sir." And then in one shop, when they'd already paid, they kind of stormed out and told the security guard, "This is really disrespectful." In another shop, someone called them sir. They hadn't paid yet and just kind of stormed out. And look, if I undergo top surgery, if I undergo HRT, that doesn't mean I'm magically going to pass. And that's the thing. If I could wave a magic wand and have the body that suits me a little bit better than I would, but it's difficult.
Yeah, and it's however you need to navigate life. That's your journey. I don't think I hope no one listening is trying to think of a solution for you. I think however you navigate life, that's how you navigate life. I think that's what I hope to highlight in this, is just, here's how you're living. This is your journey.
The key thing is that lots of my friends have been incredibly supportive, over the past, especially 3 years, and a lot of my friends are yeah, whatever, even if you're wearing this, you are still who you are, and even if you and it shouldn't be a case that trans people all need to undergo HRT or have surgery. And it's just, some people, for whatever reason, might not feel safe to do it. Some people might not feel like they can afford to do it. And there's a lot of reasons why, you don't do it. And I'm sure that people listening to this are already very accepting, but I guess just to remind people that there's variety even under the trans feminine umbrella.
Yeah, and I think if anything, it highlights the need to not assume, just because someone doesn't present a certain way. I think that's, they get a lot of questions why are pronouns important?
Maybe they haven't presented that way that day because they just don't feel safe to do so. And I think that we use pronouns too much as a culture. I think that we should use the noun, the name, more often. And I think that, sure, if I say that Max went and got a slice of cake that Max really liked, most people would say, okay, Max went and got a slice of cake that he really liked. But why do we need to even use that pronoun? And I think this is just sometimes, sure, in a certain sentence, if I said, oh, Maxwell loves cake so much that if Maxwell had Maxwell's way, then Maxwell would have cake every day. That is a little bit clunky, but that's an extreme case. I don't think we need to use pronouns as much as we do. And so I would say, yes, the correct pronoun is absolutely important, but pronouns in and of themselves, I think, are less important than people think. And in rule books, you can use player one or you talk in the second person perspective. That's a more engaging way to write a rule book. Use you because you're talking to the person reading the rule book. Or if you have the player or player one, and if you're having names, just have them be short one-syllable names for people in the examples to say, or four-letter names, let's say. Alex does this and Kate does this. Like 4 letters is enough. I mean, Max did this. You're allowed to have your just 4 rule books, if you know what I mean, where you're actually thinking about how many letters is this, because sometimes I'm writing something, and if I use one more letter, then I've got to go on to this next line, which means that's this entire page, this line goes on, and that spacing matters. But yeah, pronouns, I think, are less important than we think.
Yeah, I think you're describing like narrative situations where like you would be talking about someone in the third person excessively. Like if I'm writing a novel, I might refer to my character in the third person a lot, but like, yeah, then in that case, I'm writing about a character or a person. Like, whereas conversationally, I don't think we need to, unless we're telling a story, I guess, but conversationally, yeah, I can definitely understand not relying on them so heavily. Yeah.
I mean, I did earlier use the pronoun they for a trans woman, and I try to use the pronoun they for everyone. And the reason why on my personal stream, I had everyone put she, comma, they, or he, comma, they, or just they, if that person only is comfortable with the pronoun they. And I ask people to list all the pronouns in order of how comfort they feel around that. And it was really interesting that one person went from being a she, comma, they to now being a they, comma, she. As like, oh, that's interesting. And they were like, oh yeah, that's a recent discovery. And I kind of typed to people in the private chat before I put them onto the show. And then I was like, oh, well, it's lovely to see you make that discovery. And ideally, I think that everyone should be comfortable with the singular pronoun they. And you don't really need to have gendered pronouns. And I know multiple people who use the pronoun it. One of whom was a guest on your show. One of whom is someone that is not really known in the board game sphere, but I know them through board games. And this person prefers to be called it because when people talk about it, then the word it shows no ambiguity. It means that this person is non-binary, devoid of gender. They are agender.
And it's just what it prefers. Like, end of story. It's just respectful. And yeah, why not?
Absolutely. It's important to respect people. That's what it comes down to. In the same way that if my friend was called something else, I wouldn't actually be calling them green unless it's to protect their anonymity. And I feel like I pronounced that in a really weird way. But in the same way, if you come and you call me he, that is like you're calling me Jeff rather than Bez. I mean, why are you calling me this thing? It's like, that's just weird. And then if you've got it wrong, well, okay. And back in the day, like, people used to call me all sorts of things other than my real name because they couldn't quite get it right. And yeah, then people sometimes called me Des rather than Bez because Bez, that's not something I've ever heard before. But look, I'll correct them. That's okay. It comes from a place of misunderstanding and mishearing. But then if you are repeatedly misgendering someone, that's not coming from a place of, that's like me just saying, hey, Frank, And even though Max is like clearly labeled there, it's like, oh, Frank. So how are you doing today, Frank? And like, surely at a certain point that becomes uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, it's very situational. Like that instance, yeah, that's like I was in art class one time, and the instructor, the first day of class, he said, "Well, I can't learn all your names that quickly, so I'm just going to call all of you Giuseppe because I had a student named Giuseppe and I liked him a lot." So he just called everyone Giuseppe. And so one time he like called on me, but he said Giuseppe, and I did not look. He was like, "Giuseppe, pay attention." I was like, "Are you kidding me right now? Like, you want me to respond to this?" Like, I almost dropped that class after that first day, because I'm like, I'm not going to sit through a whole semester of being called Giuseppe along with every other classmate. Like,
that happened for an entire semester, for like half a year.
No, it was one class. He didn't know. He changed it. He started calling our actual names the next class. But if he hadn't changed, if he hadn't not done that, I would have dropped.
I'm confused. Like, why did they do it? And what made them, like, was it a weird experiment on you?
I think it might have just been like a weird, like, oh, learning names is hard. I get it. But at the same time, it's very disrespectful to be like, I don't have the time to learn your names for this first class, so I'm just going to call you something else. Like,
that's not even useful. Like, they're not even giving you, like, how do you know that you're being called upon as opposed to the person on your right?
I didn't. And
that, like, it would be like, if I say, you in the green hats and black shirts, because that's what Maxwell is wearing right now for those listening. And at least I'm kind of, that's useful. I've not taken the time to learn your name, but at least I'm telling you that I'm talking to you.
I think he thought it was like humorous on a certain level, and I did not. So luckily he started actually trying to use our names class 2. And so I took the class, and it's like, I went there for animation. This was an animation class. So I was not going to drop it lightly. Like, that would have been a huge backstep for me on my path through school. So anyway, I do not recommend that as a solution ever, especially in like an education setting where you're trying to teach people. Like,
I mean, it's interesting because using some people, playing devil's advocate, some people might be listening to that and thinking, well, calling everyone by the same name, just homogenizing it all, that feels very similar to using the third person singular they and homogenizing that for everyone. What would you say is the difference?
I think using singular they when you don't know otherwise is a safe way to go. But if someone says, no, I prefer this pronoun, and you still use they, then that's disrespectful as well. I think then you're not listening to them the same way that it's, in my opinion, that's just as being like, no, okay, I hear you, but that's too hard for me, and it's easier for me to just use they instead of respecting what you just said to me. That'd be my response.
Yeah, it feels like there's a bigger conversation to have there.
I think nuanced too. Everyone has different levels of comfortability. That's my default. Some people might not care. Like, I talked about this on another episode where I was like, I don't actually feel that strongly about my gender identity. And then I describe it, I'm like,
But you feel somewhat strongly. Like, if people were to call you she,
no, I don't mind it. You don't
mind she? Okay.
And a lot of my friends and I refer to each other. And granted, we're like, gay. And that's kind of our vernacular. But I don't, like, people say she, and I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't mind. Like, I'll dabble in drag. And I'm like, I do like feeling pretty. And like, I love doing makeup, like doing like full face makeup. I really like that process, and it's like an art form, and I really like that transformation on my face. I've especially liked doing bearded drag, of like breaking the like the both. I don't know, like it's really fun to explore. So I like all those aspects.
I think this is the most important thing, that all of these things need to be something you can explore. And as a child, when people, I almost feel like there should be a coming of age that parents are just saying, you know what, we can guide you this much. And sure, you might have these genitals, but at sometime before puberty, it's like at 8 years old, let's say, do you think you're a boy, or do you think you're a girl, or do you think you're something else? And like maybe have a discussion. And at some point, almost like a coming of age, imagine if everyone who turned 18, you had to change your name. Imagine that. So you're not allowed to even keep the same, like there's some certain age where it's like, okay, my name is now, and we are releasing you from our image of you, because so often there's this grief that, oh, we want this child, but then this child is not the way we intended. And all the time I get, oh, when are you going to have a girlfriend, and are you going to have children? We want to have grandchildren. It's, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. And I say that explicitly, and I'll say, yeah, I have other priorities in my life. And they'll say, oh, why? And it's like, oh, but we want, well, I'm sorry, but you already have some grandchildren and enjoy their existence, and I hope you enjoy my existence, but don't expect more grandchildren.
Yeah, I think coming out is that renegotiating of here's what you expected and here's who I actually am. And so we need to reevaluate where we stand, because that's what coming out is here's what you expected and here's where I'm going. So do you want to be a part of that journey or not?
Like when I was 12 years old, I had this grand idea for like a big multi-part video game series. It would have, like, obviously I hadn't worked out all the details, but it would have spanned like loads of games and been the most epic thing ever, of course. But in the village, which is one of the main villages in this game, everyone, and like, yeah, actually one of the characters, they are kind of hermaphrodites, so they latch onto each other, so they inseminate each other at the same time when they procreate, and then they both maybe have their eggs fertilized because of the way I kind of works out the biology. It's like, this could exist, it kind of works. I mean, it doesn't exist in real life, but it could exist hypothetically, and like on an alien world. But one thing there was that everyone was born, and then there was a time when okay, do you want to be, what career do you want? How do you see yourself in this village? What is your role? Are you a teacher? Are you a warrior? Are you like farmer? Are you like an entertainer? Whatever. And it felt like this is something that we need to accept for ourselves. But by the same token, it's not just, parents can get disappointed by someone not pursuing the same career path, or that they felt, oh, this is the correct career path for my child. And by the same token, even more strongly, parents get sad about maybe you never fathering a child. I don't know, maybe you will. I don't know what your plans for, like maybe, sorry, I don't know if that's too personal, because there are ways like IVF and stuff.
When people ask me, my favorite response is, well, it's not for lack of trying, which is funny because my partner is also a man. So we've been trying. It just hasn't been working. Don't know why. And then they're like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's a joke.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know how your parents or whatever are with the whole thing, but I mean, I know this is kind of more about, definitely more about me than you, this episode, but it's just like more generally, there is a more general conversation to be had about parents being disappointed. And if that were almost part of society, where it was, okay, at this age, who are you? Let's kind of almost re-examine this every year. Who do you feel like? who are you? And tell me, because I've got an idea of who you are, but let me give you a day to ponder for yourself who you are, and let me give you the space.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my mother called me one day in tears because my brother, who only has daughters, had a vasectomy. And she was like, well, you're the last one who can carry on the family name. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, who cares? What are we in, like, what time period do you think we're living in right now? Like, what am I carrying on lands that go with this? Do I not know? We're from the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. What? I was so confused. She was all in her feelings about not having a boy to carry on the family name, like we're nobility or something. I have no idea where it came from.
It's a weird thing, like the kinds of, everyone's got lots of ego, right? I mean, a lot is all relative, but I think that the notion of wanting to see a small version of yourself is kind of about ego. And by the same token, I'm not going to lie, for me, a lot of the creative process is kind of about ego. Some of it is about my curiosity about what will happen if, you talked about people being the most authentic version of themselves. And then I see like LA Dix making games that no man has made, like inspiring me to do, okay, they've done coloring in games. What would my take on a coloring in game? And yeah, being inspired by white cis het men, I assume, Rory Muldoon and Matthew Dunstan, and then be like, okay, well, what's my take on the coloring in game? Well, I want it to be actually about coloring in, so there's no points. It's just, okay, you're drawing multiple things, and at the end, you've got to show it to someone else who says what it is. And I'd kind of worked out the basic framework, and over the course of one very intense walk, and then made a first prototype that was pretty good. There was something really excellent there. And sharing this, like, I'm excited by it. I think that this could be a really powerful thing that either it will come out through another publisher or I will self-publish it like at the end of 2022. But I mean, stuff happens. You never know for sure. Like, that's the plan. But I'm really excited about it. But fundamentally, it's, why do I feel proud that I made it? Is it about wanting to bring something new into the world? Is it about me being curious to see what's possible within this framework? Because for sure, there could be a lot of possibilities within this new framework where it's not about points, it's not about numbers, it's about this actually intensely strategic 20-minute game, but then finishing in a subjective manner, which the closest parallels are like apples to apples, but then you're only doing half a second of work picking your card. Whereas here, it's like you've got this entire ego vested up, which I like that mix. But is it because I wanted to communicate something? Maybe, but isn't communication itself kind of a form of ego? That you want to put yourself out into the world. I want people to be having fun, but I want them to be having fun ideally because of me. I mean, I would rather you play a game you enjoy than play a game of mine that you won't enjoy. But if there's a choice between a game of mine that you would enjoy, like 7 out of 10, and a game of someone else that you would enjoy 7.1 out of 10, like, not so secretly, I would kind of rather that you play my game, because I do have that ego. And I think that there's that sense for all game designers, writers, video makers. It's like, look at me, senpai. I am making stuff. Please acknowledge me. Please validate my existence in the world. And it's that sense of, how can I derive validation? Is my sense of validation in having children, or is it in my connections with people, or is it in a game? Because, yeah, frankly, the more you can diversify your sense of worth, the better. And ideally, it shouldn't be just your friends. It shouldn't be just your work. It shouldn't be just your creative endeavors, if your creative endeavors are different to your work. But you know what I mean? It should be hopefully like a fusion of all of this, because that's who we truly are.
I think a phrase I use a lot that I apply to as much as I can to a lot of areas of my life, I call a healthy level of detachment. So you need to care enough to want to improve, to move forward,
100%.
to be better. But you need to not care enough that nothing destroys you. Like no piece of feedback or word or single event should ruin your life. Like you need to have enough detachment to, again, let you move forward. Like you need the drive to want to, and you need to let, enough detachment to let go of what's holding you back. I think is that like balance that I try to strike with everything, whether it's, work I make, internal validation, personal relationships. It's like, I want to make them good, but I don't want to hold on to something that isn't moving me forward, just finding a balance. And sounds simple to say, but
you've got to take pride almost in upsetting people sometimes, because
absolutely.
My first game, like someone left a comment on it saying, like on Board Game Geek, it was like, I hate games where you're silly for the sake of being silly. This is the worst of that garbage. And then I told Alan and Charlie Paul, who run Surprise Tear Games, and I told them about this on a car trip back from Essen, and they were like, well, you should be proud because this person is saying that they don't like this genre, and your game epitomizes it. If it's the worst of that garbage, then you've kind of managed to encapsulate exactly what it is. So for someone who does like it, they will love it even more. If you were trying, and it kind of goes back to the thing that Mark Rosewatzer keeps saying, I've learned so much from this person. And like, honestly, yeah, another cis-het white man. I mean, we're not here to marginalize cis-het white guys. Like, I love Mark Rosewatzer, like as a designer, as someone who contributes so much to the vocabulary of board games with the Timmy, Jenny, Spike demographics and the Volfos, Mervyn, and listening to them say better to make something that some people hate and some people love than everyone likes. And you could make something that for everyone is like a 5.5 out of 10. I mean, that's probably possible that you appeal to 99% of people, but yeah, you're not going to do that. It's more, and those people, why are they playing this 5.5 out of 10 game, frankly, when you could be playing a better suit for your group? Say, hey, we are in the mood for this. Let's play this. This is going to be like 8 at worst for the person well, maybe it would be like a 7 for the person who likes at least at the table, 10 for someone else, and the person who thinks this is like 1 out of 10 isn't here at this table, so that's okay. And maybe we separate tables because maybe there's 8 of us in this house, we're playing games together, maybe it's okay to split up. And that's fine, we don't need to play everything together. And by the same token, I guess you could draw a parallel between freedom from and freedom to, because I do think that generally freedom to should be more important, like when it's about identity and self-expression. And I'm not going to lie, like ages ago when I was like holding hands with like someone in the street, like it was like because of how we were, it's like, oh, I feel uncomfortable with this. But then a few years ago when it was like different optics, I didn't feel uncomfortable with holding hands. And that's my own ingrained bigotry. And again, like trying to unlearn that. But it's like, yeah, you don't want, I mean, there has to be a line. If my neighbors wanted to play music at 100 decibels, like right now, or like going on until like 3 a.m., I'd go over and ask them to stop. But like, okay, once a year, New Year's, like, okay, that's fine. I understand you're going to be playing until like 2 a.m. That's reasonable. But again, there's limits, but there's also limits to how much you can. Some people are just going to be offended just by you existing, just by the way you dress, just by you putting on lipstick or whatever. And I almost want to say, well, to heck with those folk.
No, absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about your games specifically. You've mentioned them throughout the conversation, but maybe just like talk to me about your aesthetic, like what you go for in games. Talk to me about your games, and then we'll start there because I want to follow up with how people can find them.
Ooh, well, my games tend to be simple and accessible, and I think that I see games as an inherently inaccessible thing. That a game is asking you to do something, and if you can't do that thing, you can't play it. You cannot play my game Yogi if you can't move your body. If you are missing one of your limbs, then you are going to struggle. And genuinely, there was one person at the bar where it was, oh, yeah, you actually can't play this because you're missing an entire hand. And if it says discard on right hand, or, that's like a problem. But to think about that and to remove that aspect of the game would take away from what it is. Similarly, a game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures, you need to be quick. But I think that my approach to design is, I'd like to think that I try and avoid unnecessary inaccessibility. And I try to make it open to people. And I generally like to make it joyous. And yeah, most of my games are simple, but at the same time, I'm also working on a game that's been signed up by a company called Inside the Box. We're having a meeting tomorrow. It's called Seize the Power, where the game is very adult. It's about bigotry and discrimination and bribery and corruption. And so you've got aliens that might have eye stalks, and one of the cards says, if you've got eye stalks, you get 5 money at the start of your turn. And it's just, there's nothing to make up for not having eye stalks. There's no good thing about not having eye stalks. The more arms you have, the better. The more eyes you have, the better. If you have eye stalks, you're amazing. That's just the way it is on this planet. And I might say, okay, well, you're due to get 5 money, but, and here's where the corruption comes in, I'm running this rule. So I have the power because most of the rules, yeah, there are meta rules for the game, but most of the power cards are in the hands of the players. So I'll say, well, if you give me 2 money, then I'll make sure you get your 5 money from the bank. Otherwise, this rule isn't going to be happening because it's down to me to decide whether it happens or not on every given turn. So yeah, that's something that hopefully we can bring out to provoke thought and send a message that people deserve love regardless of what they look like. I mean, that is the fundamental message. And I hope that, but I know that it is, how can I put this, delicate, and it could go badly. And I'm really hoping that it adds and helps make the world a better place. I think that's fundamentally my approach. I like to try and make the world a slightly better place, and I try to be mindful of the things that I do. But at the same time, experimentation matters, which is why I do things like a game about speedily selecting 7 cards, searching for synergies, and then there's this madcap thing that it's not going to be the best version of the game. It just comes in a bag. And I know that some of the numbers, if I play tested it 100 times, might be slightly better, but you can only do so much. And it's fundamentally a case of, well, if you like this idea, have this game. I'm selling it at a $5 because I'm aware that it's an early copy. And later down the line, if it goes well, you can see that you were a hipster and you got in on the ground floor. But yeah, I find it hard to summarize, but hopefully that's been a good enough job.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think if you were to describe because I think most of what I've seen from you is like very creative and like, here is the game, and sometimes the game is literally the title of the game itself. Like the rules are the title. Like you just said, that's literally the name of the game, is quickly drawing 7 cards and hoping for synergies. Oh, that's the name of the game, and that's how you play it. There, you just learn the game. I feel like they're very like simple, like core systems that you find very fun and engaging that you want to share with people. And you do you didn't mention, I feel like you do you do the design, the development, you do the art from what I've seen. I don't know, I've seen one that you haven't done the art. And
so
then you do...
if another publisher publishes it, then I probably won't be doing the art. So Yogi, when it was remastered, let's call it by Gigamic, mechanically, I told them 1.5 cards to tweak, which they did. And the rules and everything are as it was in the original, but the art was all completely redone. Similarly, I don't expect to be doing the art for Seize the Power and the art for Wheel of Death. It's a ridiculous 2-player, almost perfect information abstract strategy game. I guess I start from a hook. If people talk about starting from theme or mechanic, and I'm more likely to start from a mechanic than a theme. And sometimes I will make games just because I'm like, I really want to know what this will turn out like. And I've made so many games and play tested them, and it's like, oh, that's what it turns out like. Okay, that's fun. It's not a great game though. So let me kind of abandon that. But it was really worthwhile because then it kind of tells me more about games. And there's this new mechanism that probably no one will ever see, but it's just exploration. And then if it's like, okay, now finally it's a hook, because for Seize the Power, I had the idea of what if people controlled the rules of the game? And then it wasn't until Tiz Creole was chatting at kind of designers gathering that I helped organize, where everyone was doing little talks, and then Tiz touched upon discrimination, and that entered my mind. It was, oh, discrimination, rules that people control. There feels like there's a parallel, and that felt strong enough to be the hook. And then I feel like fundamentally there needs to be a reason you're playing the game, and that reason can come from anywhere, whether it is, sure, the mechanics or the theme or the some unique twist or some juxtaposition or some incredible piece of artwork that, like, okay, but it's why are people going to play this game? Start from there and keep going and make a good thing, hopefully.
So how can people find your games? Are they readily available? How do people find anything about you? The amazing things you do?
Oh, shucks. Check me out at Stuff by Bez in all the places. That's stuff because I make stuff, STUFF, by, as in because I'm the originator of them, Bez, BEZ, that's my name. So if you go to stuffbybez.com, you can also go to stuffbybez.bigcartel.com, which is a shop that I've had for ages, twitter.com/stuffbybez, instagram.com/stuffbybez, youtube.com/stuffbybez, and I stream there, and twitch.tv/stuffbybez. I stream every day at 10 a.m. UK time, and I probably will keep doing so until summer, well, Q2, Q3, because summer depends on where you are in the globe. So Q2, Q3, 2023, I will stop streaming then, and I will move to Thailand, and then I will not keep streaming at 10 a.m. UK time because it's not going to be convenient for me. And the reason why I stream is to have people on and have fun conversations, and I might actually be streaming at a US-friendly time when I move, which will be exciting.
There you go. Awesome. Well, that was amazing. I mean, outside, I think a little bit outside my normal format, if my show has a format at all. But no, I really enjoyed having you on. I'm so glad that we found the time to make it work and connect and talk about all this stuff.
Thank you very much for giving me the space. And it's interesting because I mentioned that I've chatted for thousands of hours on stream, and a lot of those hours have been about me, about my own stories and about who I am. I've talked about pronouns and why the correct pronoun is important and why I personally list not he, him, because I feel like if people know that you're a he, then him and his is the correct way to put it. It's only with neopronouns that people don't understand. Like I've never had the chance to share a lot of these stories that I've been chatting about tonight. And thank you for giving me that space. And thank you for sharing the stories from everyone else. It is a really lovely thing to listen to.
At the end here, as a disclaimer, I just want to remind everyone that we're just a couple of queer folks and we do not speak for the entire LGBTQIA+ community, nor are we trying to. The best way to be an ally is just to keep learning, listening, and remember that we're all just trying to figure it out together. That's all I have. If you're listening, know that you're loved and perfect just the way you are. And until next time, bye.
Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for listening along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go.
Yay.
Bye-bye.